Quite a number of young South Africans who volunteered went into Delville Wood, and very few of them came out alive.
14,000 South African soldiers lost their lives during the First World War.
This monument will depict the real South Africa that we are actually aspiring for as a nation.
So we had to transform it.
This is who we are. This is what South Africa is today.
Hence, then the transformation of that museum was then a key thing to then tell the story from both fraternities of black and white in South Africa.
July 2016 marks the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Delville Wood. The Delville Wood Memorial has been through 3 stages of evolution. The first is the construction of the initial memorial in 1926.
This memorial was set up in Longueval, Delville Wood. Initially, it was more of a political statement by the racist regime to honor only the whites that fought, especially at the Battle of Delville Wood, which took place in 1916. It excluded all the Africans, Cape Colored Corps, the Native Labor Corps, the Indians, Chinese, all of whom did go to fight.
Whose heritage are we actually then celebrating? We need an inclusive heritage, not heritage that is basically marginalized. You needed a heritage that then talks to everyone within the country that we're actually living in, which is black and white.
The second edition of a memorial in 1952 was in commemoration of those who lost their lives in World War II. In 1986, the museum, which is modeled on the Dutch settler castle in Cape Town, was built around the cross by the South African government during a period of intense popular struggle against the apartheid state. The earlier commemorations at the site had 2 notable omissions. Firstly, the role and loss of life of the South African Native Labour Corps was never acknowledged. Secondly, there was no roll of honor listing the individuals who lost their lives in the conflict.
The victory could not have been won without our ancestors playing the role that they played, offloading weapons, ammunition, digging trenches, carrying stretchers, taking care of the wounded, and some even fought, literally. And oppressed people, not free, went to the aid of free nation and assisted them. And they were not honored like the rest. As a first step towards correcting the lie that was told in the past about the participation of Africans in particular and generally the Native Labour Corps. We were honored by the presence of the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa to be part of the reinterment. One Native Labour Corps corporal who is buried inside the Delville Wood, inside the memorial. Private Mianga was buried there in 2014, 2 years ago. That was the first phase of the transformation of the Delville Wood War Memorial. The second phase will be to open a wall of remembrance where all the participants, the soldiers who are known to have participated in both wars, the First World War and the Second World War, will be inscribed in a wall of remembrance.
We had literally a year to take this project from what it was to where it is now, which is now a transformed monument that then tells the story of the black and white soldiers that actually fought and fell in the Battle of Delville Wood. This will now actually tell the real story. And hence then we then feel that given the dynamics of where we're actually now dealing, which is a foreign country, foreign laws, all of those things had to come into play. So we then appointed a project management company in this regard to be able to help us because of this being a project outside of the borders of South Africa.
The project team was appointed in 2015. The process that followed included extensive historical research, on-site research, design development, and consultations with professional teams.
A lot of research was done to understand how to get in line with the concept. We decided we will put up the names on the memorial, but it's going to be representative of the new South Africa. So the names are not going to be in order of rank, order of race, color, or how important you were in the war. The fact that you lost your life in the war is a big enough sort of loss to the country, and that's the reason your name would be on that wall. So there's no sort of discrimination in terms of where certain names went, etc. One of the key sort of design features is that we've created a scar in the landscape and creating a sort of a trench, which also has relevance to the war that was fought, because during World War I, trenches were quite popular in terms of defending and creating their barrier lines and defense lines. And as you walk through the memorial walls, the landscape around you sort of disappears, and you come into this sort of sensitive, almost emotional space where there's two walls on either side, and with the 14,000 names on either of the walls. As you walk through that path, you once again emerge out of that walkway and back into the world as we know it. So it's a very sensitive, emotional space that we created in the middle there that's not overpowering on the existing elements, and more, it blends in more than anything.
There is a museum also, which also needs to be transformed, because what you have inside the museum depicts apartheid propaganda, and it doesn't show the role that the Native Labour Corps played.
That museum is not actually showing what South Africa is actually aspiring and actually trying to achieve. Social cohesion, and it is not an inclusive museum.
The current phase includes transforming the existing museum interior to address the underrepresentation of many black South Africans in the First and Second World War.
That's part of the brief where we had to transform the museum. So we worked closely with artists, looking at the existing architecture of the building, looking at the existing sort of fabric of the building, and try to transform it to be more in line and be representative of what actually happened during the First World War, and also be in line with South Africa as it stands today.
The building's interior presented challenges for transformation. The light through the glass windows and the dominance of the four-track cross in the courtyard needed to be modulated to create a range of moods more suitable for a contemporary exhibition. The entrance gallery will retain the view of the cross and grave in the courtyard. Information will be provided to orientate the visitor. For Room 2, a commemorative banner has been put up to lead visitors from the entrance gallery to Room 3. In Gallery 3, a commissioned artwork will dialogue with the bronze, which will suggest opposite themes of memory and intangible heritage.
The idea is that you have two artworks in one room that both deal with the Great War in Africa, but speak to completely different approaches or views of the war. So in response to the bronze, directly opposite from that gigantic artwork by Mike Edwards, will be a large video piece. So with this particular video, I'm focusing on the trauma of what happens to a singular person within the war, not just a generalization of an army led by a general. So you'd see images of a young man, for example, where through his expression, his eyes, you can sort of see that he's steadying himself, the seriousness with which he's taking, the slow dressing, wearing his regalia, straightening his hat, tying his buttons, getting ready to step off sort of the ledge and head off into this world.
In Exhibition Room 4, a researched history of the First World War in the theatres of war in German Southwest Africa, German East Africa, Egypt and Palestine will be presented, showing the involvement of all South Africans. This exhibit will also touch on the impact of war on the Union of South Africa, as well as on the places and people in German Southwest Africa and German East Africa. Questions will arise about the utilization and treatment of labor and the war's impact on indigenous populations. In Gallery 5, there will be an artwork opposite the bronze. The idea of artwork is to create an incredible experience at close range, since the gallery is quite narrow. In Room 8, called Researching the Lost, is an exhibition which combines factual information with artworks to reclaim the memory of the Sandlak and others lost in the sinking of the SS Mendi. The background wallpaper has been changed in Room 8 to incorporate the new look and transformation of the museum. The significant changes of the SS Mendi will be complete by February 2017.
There needs to be some change in the manner in which Delville depicts the role and history of South Africa. We can't have reconciliation in South Africa and outside of South Africa not to show the real history, military history, but also the real history of South Africa that is evolving and changing.
Phase 2 of the project will transform Rooms 6, 7, 9 and 10. These exhibitions will deal with the themes of power and the destructive impact of war, themes of loss and absence, of women's experiences both at home and within war zones, of the madness of trench warfare and the homecoming experience of dislocation. Questions will arise about the illogic of war. Finally, visitors will be able to reflect on these themes and inscribe their responses into a special interactive exhibit, as well as view film material in the viewing room.
The last phase will, of course, be the opening of the Mendi Memorial, which will be commemorated next year, the centenary of the sinking of the Mendi.
In 2017 Feb, when the SS Mendi is then being commemorated, the view is to then even connect it to South Africa through the 5 memorials that we're actually sitting with.
The future for me is that those guys that lie buried in France and elsewhere in the continent are not forgotten. They are not forgotten, and their history is told. Unfortunately, the majority of them, especially the Native Labour Corps, don't have relatives that we can refer to. But their sacrifices should not be forgotten.
South Africa. Africa. Oh. Patanisu Tumurayo We Baba Israel Metana Nazo Yetu Baba Ngosi We Baba Sigele Au Sigele Latina Otina Losa Polwayo Morena Buluka Sichaba sa Yesu Uveli Setinari Matwenye Yeho Osibuluke Osibuluke Morena Osibuluke Sichaba sa Yesu Sichaba sa South Africa